I'm looking good.
Historically speaking, the Burnout franchise had two games. The original Burnout released in 2001 with positive reviews, even though over time it hasn't aged well with some aspects. But it's still a solid racing game in its own right. Then, in 2002, Criterion made the sequel Burnout 2 Point of Impact, and it was much better. It improved upon the original on a lot of things, like difficulty, controls, physics, more content, among other things. It even sold more than its predecessor, with nearly 850,000 copies worldwide. For reference, Burnout 1 sold only 740 copies worldwide, and while that isn't a big increase in terms of sales, it was still an improvement nevertheless. So, after the success of these games, what Criterion Games was going to do next? Well, during the development of Burnout 2, Criterion began talking to EA, who wanted to have a proposal with the developers to make a remake of the 1988 skating game Skate or Die. The studio was motivated to work on the project. After the release of Burnout 2, Criterion prepared a pitch to EA Canada about working on a second game with the publisher. Criterion's proposed title was Need for Speed Split Second, a stunt racing game within EA's Need for Speed series. Meanwhile, the Skate or Die's remake project was thrown into disarray when EA requested changes to the game's design, and the creative direction of the project shifted away from Criterion's vision, and with the development staff becoming unhappy and stressed about the project, the studio decided to contact EA and cancel the game. EA was displeased with the decision, and the relationship between the two companies soured, leading to dissolution of the proposed Need for Speed game. Fast forward to 2003 at E3, Criterion Games director Alex Ward was approached by Bruce McClellan, who at the time was the vice president of EA Worldwide Studios, and wanted to reconcile EA's relationship with Criterion, but Alex Ward refused, citing their experience of working with the publisher. Nevertheless, EA persisted and suggested Criterion to make Burnout 3 with them, with EA not interfering with the game's development, and the studio had the freedom to create the game they wanted. Development of the game was started after E3 2003, and this time around with a larger team working on the game than its previous iterations. In spite of the rocky start in their relationship with EA, the studio admitted to benefiting from the publisher experience during the course of the game's development, and then by July 2004, the development of the game was nearly complete, with the rest of the work consisting of bug testing the game and polishing the experience for the consumer. And in September 2004, the game was released with universal acclaim. Critics say that the game is one of the greatest games of all time. But why is that? What kind of gameplay elements were added that made the game the way it was? Well, we will find out in this review. At first glance, Burnout 3's gameplay may look pretty identical to its predecessor, Burnout 2. Its gameplay is pretty arcadey that emphasizes dangerous and fast-paced driving. However, in Burnout 3, it adds a new mechanic that not only rejuvenated the Burnout franchise, but also the arcade racing genre as a whole. The one and only, the Takedowns.
Oh, that's good.
Takedowns involve hitting your opponents until they crash, which in and of itself, it's easily the most rewarding thing in this game. Seeing your rivals turn into car junk is such a delightful thing to see. There are many ways you can take down your rivals, like slamming rivals into the wall, making them crash without touching them, slamming them into a generic car, a van, or even a truck, and even slamming them in a specific area. These are called signature takedowns, which I'll talk about later. There's even the after-touch takedowns. During a crash, you can steer your car and smash into your rivals to get your boost back, which is very good. Slamming your rivals will earn you boosts, and speaking of that, unlike in Burnout 1 and 2, where you can only use your boost if it was full, in Burnout 3, this is no longer the case. As long as you have some boost, you can do that anytime you want. Similar to the previous games, you gain boost by drifting, near missing traffic, driving the wrong side of the road, you know, the usual stuff. However, it gets even better. With the takedowns, not only you earn boost, but your boost bar will be extended up to 4 times. which is very rewarding, but hitting traffic, your boost bar will be decreased, making the gameplay more of a high-risk, high-reward style. You go full speed, and if you hit the traffic, then it's probably mostly your fault. The controls have been revamped as well. It offers the perfect balance of precision and style that, in my opinion, many modern racing games lack. Matter of fact, Burnout's gameplay inspires some of the games from the Need for Speed franchise, like the reboot version of Hot Pursuit and the 2012 version of Most Wanted. So the next time you ask yourself, why are these two games so Burnout-like? Well, it is probably because it was inspired by Burnout 3. It doesn't end there. Burnout 3 offers a new career mode called World Tour, which consists of racing around the world in the USA, Europe, and Asia. In comparison to Burnout's 2 career mode, Burnout 3 is much more deeper than you think. It has lots of modes: single race, road rage, elimination races, face-offs, burning laps, crash events, and special events. Single race, elimination races, face-offs are self-explanatory. There isn't much else to talk about it. But road rage is a new game mode for the single-player campaign. Basically, it consists of destroying as many rivals as you can within the time limit. The event ends either with the timer reaching 0 or the player's car is destroyed. It's a pretty fun game mode that totally demonstrates the full potential of the takedown mechanic in the Burnout franchise. Burning laps are events where you need to beat a lap time to get either gold, silver, or bronze. Preview laps are similar to burning laps, except this time around, it introduces players to cars that haven't unlocked yet. Special events are unlocked when you earn enough gold medals, and you get invited to these events. Winning them will reward you with a special event postcard, which will be useful for getting a secret car. There's also Crash mode, and has been enhanced to take advantage of the After Touch feature. Similar to its predecessor, the goal of this mode is to create the largest amount of damage in a multi-vehicle collision at a junction full of traffic. In addition, there are cash bonuses, score multipliers, speed boosts, and even Crash Breakers power-ups that can help you in a pinch, and they are important for your success. I actually like Burnout 3 Crash mode more than its predecessor, because actually the crash events are more of a puzzle if you think about it. Trying to calculate which is the best way to make an insane crash and then some. Not to mention that there is a new feature called the Crash Breaker. When enough cars are totaled, you can blow yourself up to make a huge explosion that would put Michael Bay to shame.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Also, the amount of cash you get will dictate what medal you get, so the higher the score, the higher the medal is. The World Tour has 173 events, which at first might be a little bit too long for its own good. I mean, the Black Box NFS games, most notably Underground 1, 2, and Most Wanted, while good, were infamous for their lengthy campaigns, which lasted way longer than they should. But in Burnout 3, this isn't the case, as most of the events were pretty short, given its fast-paced gameplay. As you progress to the World Tour campaign, you unlock more cars and new tracks. Not only that, but you get Burnout points. You get these by doing lots of things, like boosting, near misses, drifting, etc. As you accumulate more Burnout points, you unlock extra cars that are not unlockable in any event. In addition, you also unlock achievements for doing a lot of things, like doing a specific type of takedowns or an accumulative amount of takedowns. This is pretty important, especially when doing signature takedowns, because it also counts for your achievements. Not to mention that when you do all the signature takedowns in all of tracks, you unlock a new car. Speaking of cars, the car roster in Burnout has been revamped, and for the first time ever, they are divided into classes: Compact, Muscle, Coupe, Sports, Super, and even Special. Each class you progress, the cars get faster and stronger than ever. The car models are even more detailed than the cars from Burnout 1 and 2. The quality has been improved and then some. They really look like real cars, really pushing the PS2 and Xbox to its absolute limits. While no other cars are returned from the previous Burnout games yet, The Ultimate Custom Coupe somehow made its appearance in Burnout 3, and despite appearing in the special series, the rivals will use cars from the Coupe series, so basically the special car is a coupe car. The tracks from Burnout 3 are really well made. The roster is divided into 3 regions, like I said before, USA, Europe, and Asia. There are 10 circuit tracks, 4 point-to-point tracks, and 4 marathon tracks in the game. Each circuit has its own signature takedown. As for the track's layout and design, Criterion really nailed them to the core, as the tracks were much more dense and complex than the circuits from the previous games. Also, for the first time ever, Burnout 3 supports both split screen and online multiplayer, which was pretty good, as online gaming back then was becoming more relevant. Sadly, in April 2010, the servers were shut down, so if you want to play Burnout 3 online, then you're shit out of luck. Sorry. For a 2004 game, Burnout 3 really shines like a rising star. Not only looks great, but runs very smooth like butter, at a glorious 60 frames per second. And you know, that should be a requirement for racing games in general, as 30 frames per second on a racing game nowadays feels like shit. However, the crash scenes do run at 30 frames per second, which is kinda but thankfully there's a 60 FPS patch for the crashes, and it's actually more fluid than I thought. One thing that I really liked about Burnout 3 graphics was the advertising. There were lots of advertisements, mostly EA stuff, like Underground 2, FIFA, Battlefield, etc., which is pretty neat. But wait, there's more! Just like with Burnout 2, Burnout 3 supports 480p, which results in an even more crispier image. Not to mention that with the PCX2, you can upscale the game up to 4K to make it more prettier, and actually upscale it feels very amazing with a widescreen patch enabled. The textures, the lighting, shadows, and color are really well detailed for a Burnout game. It even manages to give GT3 a big run for its money. On a side note, I remember like in 2017 when I first played this game on PCX2, the game couldn't render the skybox. As a result, it was black all the time, so it's as if you're racing in space, which is really hilarious. But nowadays the PCX2 has received tons of upgrades to make the game more prettier and accurate, of course. Unlike in the previous Burnout games, the game doesn't have an original soundtrack during races. Instead, thanks to EA, they opted to include licensed music, and this was common in most EA games, like the Need for Speed games, SSX, and FIFA. With solid licensed songs like The Lazy Generation from the F-Ups, Stay in Shadow from Finger 11, Time and Time Again from Chronic Future, and Just Tonight from Jimmy Eat World. It doesn't end there. For the first time ever, Burnout 3 has an in-game radio disc jockey, Ted Ramon Stryker, otherwise known as DJ Stryker. He is an American radio personality and a disc jockey. He also worked on the radio station KROK-FM as a DJ. He also hosted several shows on MTV, Fox Sports, VH1, as well as appearing in many movies like Out Cold, The Sweetest Thing, and Grandma's Boy. Right now, at the time of writing this video, he's now co-hosting the afternoon show and KRSR in Los Angeles. As for the performance of this game, he really nailed it with this amazing radio personality, and he made the game more palatable than it already was.
Want rock? Crash. What's up? I'm Stryker, streaming to you 24/7. Burnout and me, the hottest partnership. Here's an ancient racing proverb: it's better to burn out than to fade away. Burnout, the only place to tear a car in half. Bring it on! You're with me, Stryker. I'll bring my mom, my dad, my criminal brother, and all to rock and roll. Hi, I'm Stryker. I love the smell of gasoline in the morning. I'm crashing out all things that are supposedly rock. I'm Stryker. Stand by. We got the cars, we got the locations, and I'm bringing the music. I'm Stryker on Crash FM.
As for the sound effects, they're pretty solid in their own right, so there isn't much else to talk about it. But I can tell you one thing, the crash sound effects are chef kiss. When you were a kid, have you ever asked yourself one thing? Gee, what if I wanted to play this amazing game on the go? and then you find out that a Burnout game is going to be released on a new handheld from Sony, the PlayStation Portable. It was released on September 13, 2005, which was actually the same day that Revenge was released for the PS2 and Xbox 360. Essentially, Legends is Burnout 3 but on the go, but also has a lot of fan service, most notably the return of most of Burnout 1 and tracks. However, only one Burnout 1 track made its return, which kinda sucks. I get that the first entry of the franchise wasn't the best, but at least I wish that it had all of them, but alas. On top of that, there is no point-to-point and marathon tracks in this game, but that's to be expected given the storage limitations of the PSP. But like I said, it's made up with the return of circuits from previous games, so at least there's that. Not only that, but all of the cars from Burnout 2 make a return, which is pretty neat. Burnout's one car roster is not very good, and I'm glad that they didn't make a return in this game. Gameplay wise, it's pretty identical to its bigger brother, Burnout 3, however a mode from Burnout 2 makes a return, the Pursuit mode, which takes advantage of the takedown mechanics, making the mode more complex and better than its predecessor. Graphics wise, Legends feels similar to Takedown, albeit with lower texture quality and 30 frames per second on the original handheld. Fortunately, thanks to emulation, more specifically PPSSP, there's a 60 FPS patch for the game, which totally rejuvenates the experience of this version. As for the tracks from the previous games, they look pretty neat. The transition from Burnout 2 to Legends was pretty decent in its own right. After all, they ported the tracks from two games that were from consoles that were much more powerful than a handheld, and somehow they look great on the PSP. Pretty faithful. As for the soundtrack, it's actually from Burnout Revenge, so that's pretty neat, given the songs from that game was peak music and then some. Though in this version, DJ Striker is not present in this version, but once again, that is expected given the space limitations from the PSP UMD discs that the handheld used. In conclusion, Burnout 3 is truly one hell of a game. Calling it good would be an understatement. Here we have a game, a racing game no less, that defined the arcade racing game genre. It managed to take the formula of its previous brothers and managed to go even further beyond, making Burnout 3 one of the greatest games of all time, and for a very good reason. Not to mention that no other arcade racing game has managed to outclass Burnout 3. Even great titles like Need for Speed Hot Pursuit and Mario Kart 8, which they are great games, make no mistake, but they will never outshine or outclass the child prodigy of arcade racing known as Burnout 3. Its transition to the portable era was also a success. With the 60 frames per second patch, it was just as excellent as its PS2 counterpart. Overall, Burnout 3 and Legends are truly masterpieces of pure peak excellence arcade racing and then some. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more content. And in the comments below, I want to know, do you think Burnout 3 is the best racing game ever? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. And that is all folks, see you next time.